Welcome to Life with Beth and Court, where life is always interesting,
We sold everything to live on the road full time.
despite having zero experience.
Now we bring you lessons, laughs, and stories from the road.
Buckle in for an entertaining ride. And we're back. Welcome back to another episode of Life with Beth and Court. I'm Beth.
I'm Court.
And today we are talking about a topic that is a bit more prevalent than you may know on the surface. And we want to be open and honest about our experience with it. And that topic is depression.
Yes. And so I want to preface with, anyone who might be triggered about talking about depression or suicide, this is probably where you want to pause the podcast and just tune in for the next one, because we certainly don't want anyone to feel triggered because we will be talking about those things.
So one of the things that we always tell you is that we want to be open and honest with you about what we're going through, what we're learning, what we are experiencing, and we're not here to hide the messy, dirty parts of life. And we know that there are plenty of those, especially the last year, well, I guess 9 months, that we've been living in a COVID world.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Barbie world, but a little bit.
But way more terrible.
A little bit worse.
Unless you don't like Barbie, then I guess it's equally terrible.
So the topic we're talking about today has been exacerbated for a lot of people as we have been in isolation and in lockdown and in quarantine for so many months on end. And on top of that, there's a lot of people who have not only fought the virus itself, but who have lost loved ones. And some of our dear friends have been in both of those categories. And so we want to share our experience with depression and anxiety, and in hopes that it may help someone out there, that it might untabooize. That's not a word, but we want
destigmatize.
That's a much better word because it's an actual word.
Right.
I think. I don't know. But
It
basically,
is now.
we want to bring this out in the open. One of the things I think about is Brene Brown. She always says that shame is formed with humans and shame needs to be deconstructed with other humans. And so depression and anxiety has, for a long time, been a topic that was not, quote unquote, supposed to be talked about, that we were just supposed to put on happy faces. And that's not true. And we need each other and we need to talk about it. And so when I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking how many firsts we've had together, and how many of our years since we've met each other have been different. And, you and I have created our own traditions, and it's been 5 years. It's a long time. It's been 5 years. And so I was running through my mind what each of those years have looked like. And, this Christmas was different for us this year. Well, technically last year, 2020. But this Christmas was different for us. And then, you and I were talking about it, and it was different in many ways. We were first time having Christmas in Florida together, first time having Christmas in a camper together. But also, this Christmas was 2 years since you and I had a pretty scary incident.
Yeah, and I do want to touch base on, depression and anxiety often get lumped together, but they're two very different things. And so while we're focusing more on the depression side in this episode, anxiety, untouched or unidentified, could certainly spiral into depression as well. So yeah, and for me, we were brainstorming about the podcast that we wanted to do in 2021 for season 2. And so I was just digging for stories that we haven't shared. And so I was like, let's share about my depression situation, because that will be really good for people to hear who might be struggling or who just didn't know. And it's really interesting because it was so matter of fact. I just wrote it in my notes, yep, tell the depression story. And that was probably 2 weeks ago. And what I shared with you last night was there have been so many signs along the way that I needed to talk about this, but the way they presented themselves was not in a matter of a fact way. It was very emotional. And so I think for me, that was God reminding me, just because you're past it, don't discount how real it was and how scary it was. And don't take the emotion out of it, because it is a very emotionally charged situation. So that being said, Yeah, I guess we'll go back to 2 years ago on December 18th, right?
It was 2 years ago, December 18th, but I want to back up before that because December 18th wasn't necessarily the day that this all happened. It was, there was a
breaking
lot.
point.
Yeah, there was a lot leading up to it. And so kind of take us back, because I know that December 18th, 2 years ago, was not the first time that you had ever experienced depression. So tell us about the first time that you realized that you struggled with depression.
Sure. So it was 2011, and so I must have been in my 20s then, and I was doing a lot of things. So I was an overachiever, I was a perfectionist, so I had a full-time job, and then while I had a full-time job, I was going to school. While I was going to school, I was in a relationship. While I was in a relationship, I was nannying for people on the weekends. And during the week, I decided to start my own jewelry business. Like, I just kept adding things and piling them up. And at the time, I thought, wow, I'm just a really awesome human and I'm really productive. But looking back, what happened after that, I now realize that was my way of not coping. So if I kept myself busy, then I didn't really have to think about the problems that I was experiencing.
Well, maybe not coping, but perhaps an unhealthy coping skill.
Yes. And so I broke up with, so it's always in December for me, like December, whatever, for whatever reason, like both times December was the time. So my boyfriend and I at the time, we were in a very unhealthy relationship. Looking back, I was codependent. There was lots of drinking and partying and just some really unhealthy behaviors between us as a couple. But when you're young, you know, and for me, I was raised like you tough it out. Like you just figure it out, you stay committed. And at the time, that really felt like, wow, what a great value, like to show someone you care. But looking back, I now know I should have left and it was unhealthy. So there was an incident that happened. I had been with this boyfriend for almost 4 years, I think 3.5 years. He broke up with me. Like there was an incident and he was like, we just need to be done. This isn't working. And deep down, I think I knew that's what was for the best. But at the time, I was shattered and devastated. Totally. And so I remember like begging, like, no, let's figure this out. Let's figure this out. And he's like, no, like this is not good. This is not healthy. So basically from that point on, I couldn't go to work. I couldn't get out of bed. I just cried and slept all of the time. And it must have been tough for him if I'm looking through a lens of compassion. At the time, I was like, what a dick. But looking back, it must have been really challenging for him because he knew our relationship was not good and it needed to end. But I was also in a very vulnerable state. And I think he didn't want to lead me on by being kind and saying like, I'm sorry, you're struggling. What can I do? Right. It's a tough position to be in.
Well, you were also in, I think this is the situation where you also had to like continue living with him because you shared an apartment.
Yes. Because codependent and financially everything was meshed together. So I had no savings of my own. I had no safety net. So it was very hard because I was trying to make it work and he was like, we're done. And we were living in the same house. So constant reminder. And so I couldn't get out of bed. I was, you know, in a bad space. And one day it escalated. And I remember sitting in our shower in our crappy little apartment with my clothes on. And I was just sitting in the bottom of the shower with my knees tucked up against my chest thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I just kept thinking it. And eventually I said it out loud and I just kept repeating it. And I think he ended up coming home at some point and found me. And he was like, this is not okay. Like, we need to figure out a solution. And so I admitted myself to the ER and I said, I'm having the thought that I don't want to be here anymore, but I don't actually want to hurt myself. Like I would never actually do anything. And I remember that they took me to like this really bright white room and I was hysterical. Like I just kept repeating, I don't want to be here. And I was crying and completely inconsolable. So they took everything away from me, including my clothes. my bra, my hair tie, my jewelry, anything that could be used to hurt myself. And I got to sit on this little white bed up against the wall. And there was literally nothing else in the room. And they sent someone in to talk to me, and they started asking questions. They found out about the breakup, and they were kind of digging deeper. And I think it's worth noting that alcohol was really heavy in my life at this time. And I'll explain more why that's important later. But that's important to note because that was also an unhealthy coping skill that I was using. And I remember he gave me something like a Xanax or whatever they have to like just, I couldn't stop crying.
Yeah.
I was hysterical. And so they're like, well, we have one of two choices. Like if you feel like you're going to hurt yourself, then we need to admit you. But if not, we would really suggest counseling and like finding some positive coping skills. So I left and I was like, I can handle this. It's not a big deal. And then I think it was 3 days later, the thoughts came back of like, I don't, again, no intention, but I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. So I went back to the ER, did the whole thing. I'm like, yep, here's my hair tie, like whatever. Did the whole thing again. And this time they were like, okay, you've been here twice, so we really need to get you some help and we have some options here. So I ended up doing an outpatient program through Munson that was called the Partial Hospitalization Program.
And Munson is the local hospital.
Yes,
where we were.
back home. Yep. And I did this program and they taught me how to have healthy coping skills. And I basically learned that all of the tools that I had used to cope my entire life were negative coping skills. I remember feeling like it was a joke. Like when they gave me this list of things and they said, circle how you normally cope. And then like they pulled the paper away and one side was all negative coping skills and one was positive. I had never heard of the positive and the negatives were all circled.
Yeah.
And I was like, am I being pranked right now? What does this mean? And part of a partial hospitalization program means that you are working with a psychiatrist. So the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is that they can prescribe medication.
Psychiatrists can.
Yes.
Yep.
So he had me on depression medication. He had me on sleep medication. Like they kind of just gave me the medication that needed to help me at the time. But what was more impactful to me was the program. So you were working with nurses from 9 to 3, learning about healthy coping skills and learning about communication, to how to advocate for how you feel. And then there would be like group therapy for 2 hours, individual therapy for 1 hour. So it was a very intensive program. And, you know, at the end of the day, you got to go home. And so that was in 2011. That program completely changed my life, saved me too, completely saved my life, completely changed my life to the point that once I came out of the program and I tried to go back to my normal job at the time, the day I came back, I realized the main person I worked with was toxic, like a toxic trigger. And so all of these things I had just learned about, that negative side of the paper, she was part of that. And I was like, nope, I can't, like, this is not healthy. I cannot do this. And they teach you to advocate for yourself, that you'll never put yourself in a situation again where you can't hold true to your values and what makes you feel comfortable and makes you want to cope in a negative way. So that was 2011. And I mean, I think the most powerful tool walking away from that was the knowledge to know what depression was, to know how to cope with it, to know how to do my proactive skills that kept me above water, so to speak. And
so how long was that? Like when you went to that program, how long were you there?
oh my gosh, I think like just over a week, maybe.
So it was a week and it's basically like a work day. It's like 9 to 3,
It's like,
9 to 5.
Yeah, it's like going to school.
Right.
Where you, like deep school though. Like
so you went to a week of therapy school.
Yeah.
Is essentially what that program was.
Yes. And I did continue to stay on the medication for about 6 years after that, I think. So I was on depression medication, and I think I was on depression medication before that, and maybe they switched it. So I had been on depression medication for a really long time. And like I said, the tools that I learned when I could feel depression starting to come in really helped me to navigate through it, and the more proactive I was by doing them daily, those coping skills, the lesser chance depression could come in.
So the people in your life at that time, though, was there anyone around you who had any sort of awareness of what depression was, that you were struggling with it? Did they have any awareness of what good coping skills versus negative coping skills looked like?
No.
So you were, I think, probably mid-20s, and you went to this great program, and you got all this really helpful information, and you started kind of retraining yourself. But then essentially you went from this like pod of people who knew how to take care of you and help you in your particular situation, and then you were kind of transplanted back into the wild.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it.
You essentially were, I mean, they do that with animals, right?
Rehabilitation.
They go to like an animal rescue, but then when they're released into the wild, sometimes those animals don't survive because they don't know how to apply the skills in the wild. So,
well, and I would challenge that. So I came out so strong on the other side and so sure of myself that it's almost like when you quit drinking or partying, your people are like, who are you and what's going on with you? So I felt really I was so grateful, and I was like, I understand life now. So I don't think that was the disconnect. If anything, it helped me evolve to the next stage of my life where, you know, one of the things they teach you about is you have to have a support system, because one of the most dangerous things about depression is isolation and not talking about it. And to go back to your original question, no one knew. No one had a fucking clue, because I was bubbly, happy Courtney. I was I worked with kids at the time, and all the parents loved me. I had a side business. Like, no one had a clue.
So I guess what I'm saying, though, is that must have been quite a jolting transition to go from this, like, safe place where everyone knew what you were going through, everyone knew how to help you, and then being transplanted back into the wild where nobody knew that you were struggling and no one knew how to help you, really. So it was you. And you said, you know, forming a support network is important. And how did you go?
Yes.
How did you go about, though? Like, how do you make that transition of coming out of this program and then you have to tell? Well, you don't have to, but if you're gonna get the support network, you need someone. You need people to know. So how do you introduce that to the people in your life? What if they're not supportive? How did you get out of, like, when you realized that your work itself was a trigger? How do you get out of that? Like, there was a huge, you know, it was a pretty jolting, like, yep, I need help. And then you went into the program, but then coming out of the program, as strong as you must have felt and as empowered as you must have felt, that also probably was pretty jarring to be like, well, now I have to face all my old demons with new information. And how do I make this a transition so that I can hold on to the information I just learned?
So I was like loud and proud about it when I came out. I told everyone what had just happened. So I want to go back a step, because what I was experiencing at the time, when you feel like you don't want to exist anymore, but you would never actually do harm to yourself, those are called passive suicidal thoughts, meaning you have no intention to act on it, but like you just don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because there's passive thoughts, and then is
active.
Ideation, is that?
Yep. So there's passive suicidal thoughts, and then what is called active suicidal thoughts, or suicidal ideation. And ideation is that you've like actually thought about how you're going to do
ideation is like the very close edge.
Yes.
Okay.
So going back, I was very loud and proud about it. I actually started a support group on Facebook online to like tell everyone the journey I had just experienced. I think I felt like a little bit of an advocate, because I was like, if I never knew this information, I feel compelled to share it with other people who might not have known. And so I started to surround myself with really good people and feel really confident in who I was as a person. I took a break from relationships for a little bit to just like be me and go date and have fun. And so really, like, coming out on the other side, I was so strong and like so ready and so proud to share. And I would say between 2011 and the situation in 2018, we're going to talk about, I still use some coping skills I shouldn't have. Like I was still drinking and partying a lot.
But part of that too, though, I think you might have thought that was just what a 20-something does.
Yeah, and I guess this is a really good time to touch on it, that if you do struggle with depression, the best thing is to not drink at all. And I know for some people, they're like, well, I don't want to do that. But like, there's a way to navigate and know when you're going into a bad cycle. And that is when you need to stop drinking, because there are actually chemicals in alcohol that take your body down really quickly, right? Because it's a depressant. So when you have a drink and you feel relaxed, it's not a natural relaxation like you might get from exercising. And so the second that the alcohol is out of your system, in the background, your body has been producing chemicals to counteract your down feeling. Right. So it's like, whoa, we're going downhill really quick. We're going to produce this chemical to bring you out of it. So it's ramping up. And then the second the alcohol leaves your system, now you're up here. And so a lot of people will experience anxiety after drinking, and then alcohol itself is a depressant. So you're already struggling with your feel-good chemical hormones. Is that a thing? What was that? Yeah. Okay. You're struggling with your feel-good chemicals like serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine, and then you're adding alcohol into the mix. So for me, yes, I thought it was part of being in my 20s, but they specifically say in the program, don't drink alcohol.
I wonder if what you just explained about how your body's counteracting the depressant that's in your system, I wonder if that's why I got so productive after I used to drink in college. I would like get up and rearrange my entire dorm room. I'd go on a run and then like 3 blocks in be like, I hate running. I forgot. I don't know why
your
I'm doing
body
this.
was amping up. And then oftentimes people after the amp up will experience the crash, because then your body's like, oh shit, we're way up here. We've got to pull it back down here.
Because your body is made to maintain homeostasis. Yes. So anytime there's a massive flux, whether it's mental or physical, your body's like, let's get back to our stable level.
And it's the same with caffeine. So I try really hard not to drink caffeine because it alters my state of homeostasis.
Yeah.
Yes. Homeostasis. That's what I thought. I haven't said that word since like 8th grade.
6th grade, yeah.
So it's weird. So I typically drink decaf if I am going to have a cup of coffee, because I've done a lot of work to be in tune with myself mentally, physically, emotionally, and know when that's out of whack. So 2011 to 2017, maybe there would be little struggles of depression, but I could always pull myself out of it. Like I always could say, okay, you're going too far this way, let's come back this way. And then was it 2018 that I left the Y?
Yes, it was September 2018. But I would say, to back up, because it'll be important to tie in later, that in the spring, actually the beginning of the summer of 2018, you went through another breakup.
Correct. Yes, that's a good point. Let's go back to that. So life as usual. After that situation happened in 2011, where I left my current employer, I took some time off. I had a family that I babysat for. They were gracious enough to let me stay in their apartment over their garage at no cost while I got back on my feet. Got my first apartment after that. That was not with a boyfriend. I had great roommates. And so I just continued to kind of evolve down that path. Fast forward to June of 2016, I was working at the Y. We had just opened a new child development center, and I went through another breakup. And it was very similar. We had lived together. We had animals together. We had talked about getting married, and I chose to end this relationship. And even though I chose to end it, I still went through the depression. And so at this point, it's now been over 2 relationships. So at the time, I thought just breaking up was a trigger. But then as the third situation happened, I finally realized that it was grief. So a big trigger to my depression is grief. So whether that's losing a relationship, losing a friendship, losing anything
A
really.
career.
A career, that is my trigger. So that's how I was able to maintain for so long. And I thought it was the medication. So at the time I was like, oh, it's because I'm on medication, like I'm good. But the truth is I was maintaining because there was no major loss in my life.
Right. Well, and just to put this detail in there too, at the time of the second breakup that you just mentioned, you also had gone back to like 12-hour days, like
high
80-hour
stress.
work weeks.
Yeah.
Like you had a massive amount of stress. There was a lot riding on what was happening in your job. And then when there was this like massive cathartic breakthrough at work where you're like, oh, I can finally exhale. It was like a week later, and then you broke up with your other, this was another 3-year relationship. So it was another long-term relationship. So it was kind of like it wasn't just grief in that instance as well. There was also this high amount of
it's like a bunch of little pieces.
Right.
A million little things, if
yes.
you will. So again, I knew the relationship needed to end logically. Like I just knew that it needed to be done. But emotionally, that's a whole different ballgame when you're grieving. And so I started drinking more. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't sleep. And at this point, I moved in with you because you had just gotten a 1-bedroom apartment. And I was like, I need to be out of this relationship. And you're like, yes, of course you can come stay here. And so every person who struggles with depression, they have different warning signs is what we call them. So for me, increased drinking, not sleeping, and crying episodes are like my top 3. And I would say my 4th is probably withdrawing. So isolation, pulling away from people because I start to just go inward. And
plus you're a very open person. So it doesn't take much digging for someone to be like, how are you? What's going on? For you to then feel like you have to hide in your answers because you don't want people to know.
Not only that, it's just exhausting. And if they don't understand depression, then it becomes like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, you know what? I have my own shit. I don't have time to explain.
I don't have time
to
say all
Go
of this.
read a self-help book, which I mean, I'm being insensitive because they're trying to understand. But like when you're in the battle, all you can focus on is the battle. And like no one knows this battle, so I need to fight it on my own. And at this point, I had already gone through it once before. So I'm like, I know the tools, like everyone just take a step back. I can figure this out. And I'm a problem solver too. So when you add that into the mix, it becomes this really dangerous game that I start playing with myself. And so I got through the breakup and I ended up going to counseling, and that really was helpful. So I was able to slowly start doing the work and start processing.
Well, in that too is when you really realized it was actually depression versus grief, right? Because that summer you cried a lot and I didn't know what to do to help you, and I was like, what can you can talk to me, like I'm here, blah blah blah. And the things I remember from my perspective, the things that you kept saying when you were crying is you said like, that was my home. You kept saying that was my home. I just lost everything. That was my home.
Those were my pets. That was
those
my
are my
life.
Yeah. So that was, and so you kept repeating these things, and I wasn't trying to be insensitive. I myself have never struggled with depression. So, and I don't think I knew at the time that you did either. So I didn't even know. I just thought this was like a typical.
Well, I kept telling you, I'm just grieving. This is part of grieving.
And to me though, I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know what it looked like. I had no information about it. And so you kept repeating these things. And I remember thinking like, I know she's really sad, but like I've lost homes too.
Right.
Like my house burned down when I was 11, and one of our houses was foreclosed on. Like I totally understand what it's like to lose a home, to lose everything you own with it, to be uprooted. I understand that 100%. And I was like, I just don't understand though why it won't stop. I mean, there was 3 months solid of crying, and that's when I think it was very helpful that you were in counseling, because
he
finally identified.
I'll never forget the day he said, this actually sounds like depression. And I was like, I just got goosebumps when I said it, because as soon as he said it, I was like, oh my God, it's back. Oh my God, it's back. Like, I've worked so hard to keep this out. And I was telling myself the story I was just grieving, but I didn't realize those signs were blending together and it had transitioned into depression. And then I remember being so pissed, so pissed. And it was because I was like, no, I beat this. Like, I already did this once. It shouldn't be back. It shouldn't be coming back. Like, what the hell? Like, I remember just being so angry.
I remember that appointment too, in particular, because I remember like you just snapped your fingers. You can't see it, but she just snapped her fingers when she said, he said it sounds like depression. Because I remember that look on your face. Because again, I didn't know what the hell depression was. Like, I thought
Right.
depression, as most people are misinformed about, I thought it was just like when you get sad.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, of course she's sad. But like the look on your face when you were like, oh shit. And then I remember your anger, and like it was almost this like hopelessness, this wave of hopelessness came over you, because you're like, I beat this though. Like, I put this back in the box. And I remember the therapy that came after that, because you and I went together. And so I was trying to understand. I didn't get what was happening. And so I was there trying to learn so that I could be your support, because I didn't know how to support someone in something I had never experienced. And it seemed like what I was doing wasn't even helpful anymore. And so I was like, what do I do to help her? And I remember how frustrated and you were so hard on yourself. Like, I remember that part where I was like, hearing the story and understanding what it's like in your head for you. I was like, why are you being so hard on yourself? Like, you did beat this once, but that's like incredible that you did. Like, of course you shouldn't be expected to like ward it off forever if it really is these things that you guys are describing.
Right.
Like, you can't be that hard on yourself. Jeez, oh Pete's. That's a pretty light expression to use Jeez, oh Pete's. You shouldn't be so hard on yourself. But I do remember that appointment very vividly in my mind when you realized again, and that's the importance of having support though.
And awareness. Like, awareness and support are the two critical elements.
If you didn't have him, I didn't know what it was. So I certainly wasn't going to help you. I wouldn't have been able to say like, hey, do you think this might be depression that's back? I had no idea what it was. And so that's why it was really important that you had someone in your life who does know about it and who does know those signs, so that he could bring the awareness to it. So then you could fight. I mean, it would basically be, like there's a fire, and, electrical fires are different than oil fires that are different than grease fires. And depending on what kind of fire it is, you put a different flame retardant on it to stop the fire. And if you don't know what kind of fire it is and you use the wrong kind to put it out, it actually just makes it worse.
Yeah, that's a really, really great analogy. And that's why in the program, what they teach you is you write down your relapse signs, your warning signs, and then what your action plan is. And then you give that to like 3 or 4 people, because for some people with depression, like that time I was totally snowed. I was like, oh, I'm just grieving. Like, I know the 5 stages. So it would have been helpful had you had that plan to say, I've noticed you're crying a lot, and that's understandable because you're going through a hard time, but could this maybe be something more? Or, that way, if I gave it to another friend and they noticed that I stopped talking as much, what's going on? It's like you're building your army when you're your strongest. That way, when you're not your strongest, they can come in and support you.
Okay, so now we're at the point you've broken up. You've gone through counseling. We've identified that it's not just grief, that now perhaps depression is back. You work very hard in therapy for the next several years, really. I mean, you did a lot of work. You were very aware of it. I was then aware of the signs to look for. You and I would have those conversations when I'd say, hey, it seems like you've been up at 4 a.m. the last couple nights, and you're crying very easily. And sometimes I remember it was like, I remember being in the parking lot of Target, and you had cried about something, and then you looked at me and you were like, no, this doesn't count though. I was supposed to cry. It was okay to cry about this. This doesn't count, right?
This doesn't count as a crying episode, because you're supposed to monitor.
So we had become very aware of the signs. And so then fast forward, you had kind of alluded to this before. Now it's the fall of 2018
Mm-hmm.
and you are ready to leave a career that you've been in for the past 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like we had mentioned, there was a lot of stress leading up.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, gosh, I mean, you worked a lot of hours, and it wasn't just, you know, like you were stocking shelves or something. Not that that's not a very valuable position,
Mm-hmm.
but you were in charge of a child care facility that had 92 families,
Mm-hmm.
and you had 27 staff.
Mm-hmm.
You were in charge of a $500,000 budget. The childcare industry itself is very, very tough. And on top of that, you have these parents, golden, precious little children.
Mm.
You did so much taking care of so many of these families. And I know that you took it very seriously and felt like they were, you know, your kids as well. So, so just to give this a good picture of the amount of stress that you were under leading up to when you finally said, I can't do this anymore. This isn't healthy for me.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to just touch on caregivers in general, because that's also something I learned in counseling is it's typically caregivers that will give and give and give to the point of depleting themselves
Mhm.
completely, which again, if you're not being proactive with your self-care and your coping and stress management, those are all like you're just laying down the pathway for depression to come, right?
So we're
And-
looking at you, childcare
Yeah.
providers, teachers, healthcare
Yeah.
workers, the nurses, the doctors, the EMTs, the
Any
firefighters.
position where someone else depends on you
Mhm.
in your role. And some people do this outside of their professional careers. I remember Counselor Dan saying that I tried to fix people because if I tried to fix people, it made me feel better about myself.
Hmm.
But then when it came to looking at my own problems, I didn't want to touch those. So it's a very slippery slope. And that doesn't mean that you can't be generous and kind and caring, but it means that you have to set boundaries to protect yourself.
It means that you have to have your eyes wide open when you're
Yeah.
taking care of other people.
And I totally did not have my eyes wide open in the process of, so before I became the director of the Child Development Center, we closed down one facility, renovated another within a church. And so I was like on site while the construction guys were there and the electrical people. Like it was a massive transition and I was very passionate about it. And I let my passion cloud my boundaries. And
Mhm.
so I would say I probably sprinted from beginning of that project to end for what, like 3 years?
It was a long time.
It was a
it
very
was too
long time.
long to be sprinting.
Very long time. In the meantime, you and I had become a couple. And so not only was I struggling, I was bringing the stress home and not, right? Like the signs were coming back, like the
Mhm.
not sleeping, the crying, because I didn't set up those boundaries I needed. So,
Well, and I would say something that might be important for someone who hasn't necessarily identified this in themselves before is
Mhm.
one thing that I remember kind of alarmed you and I both a lot is you started, there was so much stress at work that you started waking up in the middle of the night on Sunday night
and
when
having
you,
panic
and
attacks.
having panic attacks when you
Mhm.
knew that Monday morning was coming and you had to go back to work. So,
Yeah.
you know, that is something also, you know, if you're listening and that's something that you are experiencing, you know,
Mhm.
it's not typical and that might be something
That's a good point.
that you should kind of keep
Yeah.
your eye on.
I finally made the decision that I needed to prioritize myself again. I had communicated that I needed support and things weren't just going to align the way I really needed them to. And that was a really hard decision for me to make because I thought I was going to retire from the Y. Like I thought that was my career for life. I was so committed and so passionate. And again, logically, I knew it wasn't a good fit anymore and I needed to exit, but emotionally it devastated me.
Mhm.
And so from the first two experiences, I said, okay, like, I don't know if you remember this, but I had it all planned out. I was
Yeah,
like,
I
I'm going to
do.
have counselor Dan on standby because this is going to trigger me because, you know, it's a loss and I get triggered by loss. So like I had the awareness this
Mhm.
time to know this is going to trigger me. So I'm going to have counselor Dan on standby. I'm going to have a schedule. I'm going to go back to scheduling. I already had another job lined up. And so I was proactively like knowing it was going to come. And I would tell people, I'm like, I'm going to grieve this. There's 5 stages. And I was really,
You were very cerebral about it. You were like, this is going to happen. I am going to feel emotion 1 for approximately 3 weeks, and then I will feel emotion 2 for approximately
I didn't know like
you
how
didn't know,
long.
but like you were very cerebral about it. You were
Yeah.
just stating it very like matter of fact
Because I knew.
because you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's a testament to how grief is.
Grief is a fickle bitch, man. So I had it all planned out. I started my new job. Things were great, and God, I don't even know where it blurred, like where it started this time. But basically, I would get triggered every time I would walk into the basement of my new place of work. Like, I don't know what it was, but every time I went down there
was offices down. Like there was you weren't just walking into a basement.
Yeah.
Like there were
offices.
And stuff.
Yeah. And I would just get so triggered. And then I really started. So I was in a totally different field, like nothing to do with childcare.
You needed to cleanse your palate.
I needed to cleanse my palate because when I left the Y, I had multiple people say, well, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in this? And I was like, nope, clean break. Like I just need to swing left really hard for a while. And looking back, I think that was a distraction technique. I was very burnt out.
I was going to say, I think you were desperate.
I was desperate. Yeah. And I was like, this will be a fun new distraction. I'll learn all the new things. But then compared to what my role was at the Y, I was also part of our senior management team. And so I was helping make decisions at an organizational level. Like I felt very valued and very secure in my identity of what I did as an employee. And you
felt like what you did mattered.
Yes.
That was, I mean, you had your decision making and your role had a lot of impact in the community.
And so at this other job, I just remember like it was all fine for probably a couple of weeks. And then I remember thinking like, what the hell am I doing? Like what am I doing here? And that's not to discount that they weren't doing important work because they were doing very important work, helping people get healthy and everything. But for me, I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is happening? And I think it's because my role prior was so different, like on a totally different level. Obviously, like we're talking apples and oranges. And I really just couldn't figure out who I was anymore. Because when you took out Courtney, the Child Development Center director, I had nothing left. At least that's how it felt. Yeah. And so...
Well, I remember that would even trigger you because I still was a senior director at the time at the Y, and that would trigger you to...
we would introduce ourselves to new people.
Like you said, we were a couple, so, you were always my +1 at events.
I'm your best +1.
And, but I noticed it, but I didn't understand what was, I thought you were mad at me.
Yeah.
Like what I would say, like, it's in America, unfortunately, that's how you introduce, like, hi, what's your name? What do you do? And
which I would like to change that for the record.
I would too.
Like, I would love for you to say, hi, my name is this, my spirit animal is this. I love this movie and this is my favorite book. Like, if we could just introduce ourselves that way.
And we can do, we can change that on a micro level of saying like, what's your name and what do you love?
Yeah.
But for where our society is now, people say, who are you? What do you do? And the functions that we were at, I would say, I'm Beth. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at the Y. And then you would say, I'm Courtney. And then you would walk away.
Yeah.
you would.
Because I
was like, is she mad at me? Like, I don't understand why me
and
answering.
I didn't even know what was happening at the time. Like, I knew it made me feel really upset, but I couldn't figure out why. And so later, it made me upset that you still had an identity and you were still impressive and you still had all of this about you. And I had nothing that's how it felt at the time. And so this is the part where I will warn you again, if you get triggered by talking about depression or suicide, that you might want to pause if you didn't listen the first time.
We really mean it this time.
Yeah. So this is where the passive suicidal thoughts became active suicidal thoughts. And the suicidal ideation for me, Like, I remember I would just be driving along the bay and I'd be like, what if I just crashed my car into the water? Like, what if I just swerve really hard right now and go into the water? And we keep a gun in our home. I have my concealed pistols license, and we kept the gun in the home for protection. And I kept it on my nightstand every night. And there were times where I would wake up and look at it, and it wasn't about me, but I would be like, I can't believe I can't believe it's just that easy that people could just like pull the trigger and it's over. And so those are like that thought, even though it wasn't about me, for anyone listening, like those types of thoughts are the gateway drug that lead to the actual thoughts. And I didn't know that at the time. Like, if I ever had that thought now, I would know, gun goes away. Like, it's gone, lock it up. Like, I know that's a red flag now. But at the time, I'm like, well, I'm not thinking it about me. I'm just thinking it in general. I forget what some of the other ones were, but like it had evolved at this point.
Well, I was swerving into oncoming traffic.
Swerving
as well.
into oncoming traffic.
And we lived off of the main thoroughfare into town, and so
which
that
was very
which
busy.
was it was a very busy highway, and it was people are driving 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, and it was a very different process than the first time. Like, it was a lot more active and imaginative. And I kept telling myself, those are really weird thoughts, but like you'd never actually do it. It was this weird dialogue I had in my head internally. So as I'm like questioning who I am as a person, I'm starting to have these thoughts. I'm not wanting to go back to work. The crying episodes are back. I'm trying to find a different job that like would align with who I am. And so all of this is going on without your knowledge.
I was just gonna say, and for those listening, like, it seems as if, well, wouldn't I know? I mean, because we spent all of our time together, not all of it, but we spent a lot of time together. We lived together. We talk every night. It wasn't like we, just numbed out on Netflix and never had a real conversation. We talked all the time. I had no fucking clue. Like, not a clue in the world that this was what was happening for you under the surface. And I was even aware of your signs. And I was in the therapy sessions with you. Like, I knew what to look for, and I knew that you struggled, and I knew all of these things. And
We're really good at hiding it.
And it's, as the person on the other side, it's so bizarre how intense your other person's world can be without you having a single clue.
Yeah. And like internally, it's almost like a dance with the devil. Like, the devil tempts you. And like at first, it's just a little bit of like these thoughts that go in your head that you're like, well, I'm not actually thinking this, but like I'm kind of just wondering. And so it's like this back and forth battle internally. And I think for me, even like when I was hiding it, it's because I thought it's not that big of a problem. Like, it started as it's not that big of a problem, but then it started to evolve into I wasn't sleeping again. I was drinking more. And like, as it started to progress, then it became, okay, well, I know what this is. I can fix it. Like, it's always, I know this problem best. So I'm going to take care of it before it even escalates to that level. And I don't remember how I told you or why I told you. All I remember is you
told me on that. Oh, you told me. Oh, you're right. You told me like 3 days prior.
Yeah, because you said, I remember you saying, if that happens again, if those thoughts come back again, like I told you about the swerving into traffic and everything, you said you call me. But I don't remember how it came up.
Yeah, I don't remember how it came up either, but I do remember it was rather casual. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, I need to sit you down and tell you, like, I'm having these thoughts again. You kind of, I do remember it was very cavalier in your telling me about it. And it was really, it had to have been within a week of what happened next.
It was 3 days later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that must have been, I do remember
I think it was a Saturday.
Friday.
Yeah, a Friday or Saturday, because we talked about it over the weekend. And I like made it through the weekend. So I think it was Friday or Saturday. And then Monday was the next incident. So I would get really triggered when I would get ready to go to work in the morning because I was feeling like I didn't want to be there because I was having that identity struggle. And so I would have to like give myself a pep talk every morning and then like get there and get through the day, business as usual. But this morning, so this place where I work, the hours were not typical. So I think I went in at like 11 that day. And at first I thought, how cool, like I get this flex schedule. But then looking back, I need, when I am in a place where I'm struggling, I need a structure like planned out 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. this, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. this. And so I thought it was cool, but it was actually hurting what I was dealing with. And I remember curling my hair and I set the curling iron down to my right and the thought popped in my head, the gun is in the bedroom, just go end it now. And it scared the fuck out of me because that was the first time it had been like a directive from myself. And I immediately grabbed my phone, walked as far as I could away from our bedroom where the gun was. I think I might have gone outside. I don't remember. And I called you. And I only remember what I said.
You had called me. I was in our...
It was like 10 o'clock, I think.
Yeah. At the Y, the CEO had resigned at the same time you did. And so our senior leadership team was operating down 2 of you. And I remember the 4 of us in the room. And you called me. I didn't answer. And then all of a sudden I realized, fuck, she's calling me. And she knows I'm in a meeting. I got up and grabbed my phone and went to the bathroom. I called you. You told me that the words you said were, you need to come get me now and take me to the hospital. And I didn't ask questions because I didn't need to. So I just said, stay exactly where you are. I'm going to get my stuff. I'm going to call you and I want you to talk to me the whole way home. So I went back into the boardroom and I grabbed my computer and I said, I have to go. And they said, is everything okay? And I said, no. Yeah. And then I left.
I remember sitting on the ottoman just crying. And then you called and we talked the whole way home. And I think I just got in the car.
Yeah, I got home. I came in and I got you and I put you in the passenger side. And it was odd because by the time I had gotten to you, it was like your soul had left. Like I remember that drive to town the drive to the hospital is about 15, and that whole ride, we didn't say anything. And you just sat there. You weren't even crying.
No.
You at that point, you just sat there looking. I remember thinking, like, it's so weird to see, like, the most soulful person sitting next to me with nothing in her eyes. Mm-hmm. And so then we got to the hospital.
I remember once we got to the parking lot, and I said, they're going to have to do things that might seem a little scary. Because I remembered the last time and I said, they're probably going to take everything away from me so I can't hurt myself. They're probably going to give me something to stop crying if I can't stop crying on my own. They're going to take our things and put them in a locker. And
so even in your greatest moment of need, you were still trying to take care of me. Yeah. You were worried about me and what the experience was going to do to me. And that's like a testament to how strong those caretaking roots go. Yeah. And what an absolute grip they have on people who can't stop taking care of others.
Yeah. And I remember walking in, telling them why I was there. And then I started crying, but it wasn't the hysterical crying. It was just like tears pouring down my face. Like I remember them dripping off my chin, onto my shirt, on my chest, as they have my arm out and they're taking blood and checking vitals. And I was just so zoned out and the tears just kept rolling.
Yeah, I would say that the best description of it was hopeless, not hysterical. It wasn't like you just needed a Valium. I couldn't even recognize your eyes. So then we were in that room texting your boss saying like, hey, she won't be in. I was texting, my colleague saying I won't be in. I was asking you like what you're comfortable with me because obviously I had to say something because we both just went missing.
Yeah.
I didn't know how long we were going to be there. You didn't know how long we were going to be there. We didn't know if it was going to be inpatient, outpatient. We had no answers. That room, when you described it, it's stark white. It's white. The lights are blaring in your eyes. And it was so
the
sterile.
room I got this time, that was like an upgrade. So that was not the original. Like the original room was like a padded white wall, one bed. This looked like a normal room, but you could tell like accommodations were made for someone who might want to hurt themselves. And I remember I did the normal intake question bullshit. I say bullshit because it's annoying, but thank you for doing your job.
They were I do remember they were very kind, and they were very
but like it was just such a weird feeling that I can't even describe. Like I felt like I wasn't me, and I was just like, yes, January 9th, 1988. Like it just felt really weird. And then I remember they sent someone in from community mental health, and he was asking me the questions to determine how bad the situation is. And as he was asking the questions, I said, I've tried using my coping skills. I've been drinking water. I was repeating to him everything that I had tried to make these thoughts go away. And like, that's where the hopelessness comes from, because I'm like, dude, I know what I'm supposed to be doing and it's not working. And so he was so good. He was so good. Like he could
They
tell.
all were,
Yeah, like this girl is really struggling because she knows what to do, and even she's doing it and it's not working. And it was a very intelligent conversation back and forth with him. And I remember at the end, he put his pen down and he looked up at me and he said, "You're really, really aware of what's happening, and you're very intelligent, and you probably know that I'm going to say there's enough red flags here that I can't let you walk out right now." And I just nodded my head. And I shared my experience with him previously, and I said I did the PHP program. I said that program really helped me, and I think I just need some coping skill reminders and some help. And I had a choice to either stay in the inpatient program, because this time was different. It was a lot more severe than the first time, or to go home and be on suicide watch and then go to the outpatient program if they had room. Like I remember I told him the doctor's name, I described it, and
they were full. They
told
us.
I didn't remember that.
They told us that they were full. And so essentially the options were inpatient. And then he asked me, he said, "Are you, in your role at work, are you able to stay home and work from home? Because the other option is she can be at home, but on suicide watch." And we basically I was like, yeah, but then what? Like, it's not going to just get better if she is, and we obviously were already working with a counselor. So like, what do we do? And so they were full in that outpatient program. But again, you knew the doctor's name. You kind of recounted your experience. And then that community health worker called the doctor. The doctor himself let you in the program.
Well, he was still there 7 years later.
There,
and he came back, he said, "I have some good news. So-and-so is still the one that oversees the program. He remembers you, and he is going to make an
kind
exception."
of unforgettable. Toots.
Yeah. And so, it was a blessing that I could get into the program. And we did do suicide watch at home. So you worked from home and took some time off. But that experience for you, so suicide watch,
I was terrible at it.
you were so bad
I
at
was
it.
really bad at it.
It essentially means removing anything that the person could harm themselves with. So my gun went to our friend. She took away all the knives, like all the sharp objects. She flipped the garage door handle inside out because there were a lot of things in there. I wasn't allowed to drive my car.
The car was one of the main forms of how you had thought about harming yourself. So we flipped I basically took everything that I could initially identify as harmful, even like kebab skewers out of our utensils drawer, like you said, all the knives. I will say from my perspective, I don't remember being emotional. I was just in go mode, like Mission Impossible. My main objective was to keep you safe.
You did a good job, but then a crappy job at the same time.
And when we joke about that and say that, is because I have never had those thoughts. And so it's very hard for me to look at typical household items and understand how I would harm myself with it. We were doing something, we were hanging pictures or something, and you brought in just the toolkit, right? Like those very typical, tape measure, screwdriver, whatever. You brought it into me and you like handed it to me, and I was like, oh, I don't need it right now. And you're like, no, you need to take this. And I was like, why? And you were like, open it up, look at it. And I was like, oh, I get it. I'm so sorry. So it took a bit of getting used to, but like you said, we could do it a bit in jest. And, obviously we were taking everything seriously, but at some point you need levity or it just becomes a very hopeless feeling situation. So, the why was fantastic, had a lot of support there, and they were checking on me every day, checking on you. Obviously, the people that were caring for me in our workplace were the same people who cared about you because, we worked together for 7 years. And then your workplace, the same thing. They were checking on us. They were checking on you.
Yeah,
and
both workplaces were really great about it.
They were really great about it. We had dear friends that knew about the situation, and I had to leave. I had to go help during a hiring process about an hour and a half away. Our whole senior team went. We were interviewing candidates and whatnot. And we had to, you talk about that support network.
Yeah.
And we needed it. We needed the people closest to us in our lives to know what we were going through so that they could help in those instances, so that we wouldn't have, I'm very grateful we didn't just try to grin and bear it through that situation and say, well, it's only one day. That support network was super crucial.
So going into the program this time, it was 7 years later. And so I was no longer on my medication. I had been off of it for a very long time, worked to heal my body with nutrition and, all of those things. And so the doctor wanted to prescribe me medication. And I said, no, thank you. I'm just here for the coping skills. And he's like, well, why won't you take medication? And I'm like, well, there are multiple reasons. So let me start listing them for you. And I basically we were just going back and forth, and I could tell he was frustrated with me. I was frustrated with him. And I said, I would like a couple of days to just do this program. And I know if I need medication, if we're to that point, I will have that conversation with you, but I need to try this my way first. And he didn't like it, but eventually he was like, well, I'm going to write this script for you and it's going to be here just in case.
I remember you had gotten your spice back because,
you
know,
thought
we
I
were
was going to get kicked
we were like
out
day
the second
2
day.
and you're like, and I told him and I said, and I was like, oh my God, sweetheart, I need you to not get kicked out of this program.
Yeah. And it was funny because they would joke on my last day, they were like, I'm going to miss my little co-counselor because I do have really good insight and really good value in that department. But I also needed to stop doing that as much and focus more on myself. But it was interesting because it was like a booster shot. I knew all of that information 7 years prior, but then once I heard it again, it was expedited. And I was like, oh yeah, see, I just needed this. I needed to talk through some things. So I did. I was like, yeah, so I'm thinking my last day will be Friday and I'll schedule my family session then. And they're like, oh,
like, we'll tell you when you're ready to leave.
Yeah. But it was a much faster process. So, 4
you were
days?
It was Tuesday through Friday.
Tuesday, Wednesday,
and then
Thursday,
Saturday, Sunday the program doesn't run, and then Monday, Tuesday was Christmas Eve and Christmas.
Yeah.
So
4 days, I think, of the
or Monday was Christmas.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And so do you remember when I gave myself my own homework?
Oh gosh, yes,
Yeah.
and it was Pandora's box.
Yeah. So they give you homework to do, and I did all of that, and I'm like, I'm going to try this homework with myself. And I made up my own thing to figure out where it went wrong, how it went so wrong.
You were detectiving it, with a big sheet.
I had
a
huge
you draw
dry erase board. Yeah.
You draw lines between things that correlate. And
Yeah.
it very much so looked like a crime scene sheet.
I remember every arrow that went down, so I would draw up here what the problem was and what that made me feel. And I remember stepping back from the board and feeling sick to my stomach because I had made 8 rows, and at the end of every row it was don't have a purpose. Like,
so basically you had drilled down from the trigger to what it made you feel,
Yeah.
to what it made you feel, to what it made you feel.
and all of them across the board were like, I'm not anyone anymore. Because what had happened was once I lost my identity with the Y after that many years, I honestly couldn't tell you what I liked. I couldn't tell you who my friends were outside of work. I couldn't tell you what movies I liked. I couldn't tell you anything about myself because I had become so immersed in my identity as an employee. And so when you strip all that away, it basically was, why am I here? I have no purpose anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so as bad as it was for me to do my own homework, thank God I was still in the program because I went back and told them about it. It helped me.
And they basically were like, don't do your own homework. There's a reason that we don't have you do
Yeah.
that unsupervised.
But it helped me understand that so it was grief that was the catalyst again, but this time I thought Courtney died. Like Courtney from the Y died. And I was like, well, if she's gone, then I have no reason to be here because I contribute no other value. And so it was this really shattering, powerful moment of like, I have to rebuild myself. I let myself become so consumed by my identity at work that I don't even know who the fuck I am anymore. And then that felt defeating because I'm like, oh my God, that sounds exhausting to like build new friendships and like figure out who I am by myself. And I remember I started to be concerned about codependency at that point. Or maybe I did that work with Counselor Dan, but I was like so afraid of being codependent. So I almost went like too far the other way where I'm like, nope, I can do it by myself.
Yeah.
Nope, got it.
Well, it was interesting though, because as soon as you figured out like what it was,
Where it
once
was stemming from.
Once you, while it wasn't advised by them, once you did that unassigned homework, it basically allowed you, going back to that fire analogy, it allowed you to understand what kind of fire you were fighting.
Yeah.
And then I think that's also part of the reason why it became such a quicker road to recovery that time, because it was like you knew what you were fighting.
Yeah. It wasn't because if you notice the pattern after the first time, I always thought I knew what was happening. And so it pivots like just a little bit. And the pivot this time was my identity. And so it's like you know it, but it's almost dangerous to think you know it. And that's where I got into trouble because I'm like, oh, I know what this is. Like, I know how to combat it. But each time there was something a little bit different. And my blind spot was not acknowledging that it's not always the same.
Yeah. What I'm saying though is that like once you identify that blind spot, that's when you were like,
then I could heal.
Oh, yeah. I get it. I wasn't even looking at this before. Now I understand what I should even be, because before you thought it was the career transition, and really it was more of the fact of I lost my identity.
Yeah.
And so, on top of it, it was really interesting because it was like the more time you spent with people, because in this program, you're with other people.
Yeah.
You're with, how many were in your group? 10?
It was a smaller group this time. I think only like 6.
Okay, so
the first time there were 10 or 11.
Yeah, so six or so people, and you do group therapy and you do individual therapy, and it was almost like the more time you spent with people who were hearing it for the first time, the more you realized that you really did know what was going on and how to handle it, which then kind of empowered you more. And obviously you needed that booster shot. You needed that group support. You needed, the counselors and doctors you had there.
But at first I was pissed again. My response is always, I'm pissed because what the fuck? Like, I thought I figured this out. Why is it back? So I was so mad. But then when I was in my logical mind, I was like, of course you needed a refresher. You learned these skills 7 years ago.
Right.
Like, you did group therapy 7 years ago. So it's actually kind of amazing you made it this long without needing the booster shot.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so essentially, like, when you were in that group, in the group therapy, you kind of became aware of how much you still did know, that it was just kind of sleeping beneath the surface. And that's why, you would help give insight in the group. And then the nurse who led the group therapy in, I remember, your family exit interviews or family exit meeting, I remember she said, I'm kind of sad that I'm going to be losing my co-counselor because you were so good at taking the skills and helping people apply them to their particular situation.
And I think that really helped me morph. Like, I was already on a healthier lifestyle plan, but it helped me really, like, anyone who knows us knows we preach boundaries, and that's a part of it for me, because I know that if I give too much to others without taking care of myself, or if I don't set boundaries and let toxic in, it's just waiting. So instead of being pissed that it could come back, or like it keeps coming back, my lens now is it's probably lying dormant. Like, it's in there somewhere. And thinking of the other guys where he's like, Gator wants to come out and wants to walk around.
Gator needs some spending money.
Yeah. It's not a matter of coming and going. It's always dormant. Like, I think of gene expression, that you have your genes and your behaviors, your actions, what you put in your body, what you do to your body, how you think, how you feel can change that gene expression. And it's the same for depression. So, when I set boundaries of, I need to be in bed by this time, or I can't eat junk food, because for me, there is a correlation between the food I eat and my mood. It's actually for a lot of people. So just think about that for a second. I quit drinking for other reasons, but that was another factor. Like, this is putting fuel on that fire that we need to put out. And I just look at it differently. Like, I know it's dormant, and big change and loss is a huge trigger. So I was kind of scared when we made this life decision. I was very excited, but I remember we had the conversation that I said, I feel like we just need to be proactive because this could trigger me. And thank God it didn't. I actually have not struggled with it at all. I very much so love our new life, but like, the difference now versus then is now I'm like, let's be proactive. My sleep's been a little off. Let's make sure I'm getting sleep. Let's talk about it. Let's have a counselor on standby. Whereas before, I just thought I could like skate through and I didn't have to address it. It's what it really is proactive versus reactive. I'm very, very grateful that I'm in a great space now, but I also am very aware that there will be other times. And the more I do to do the coping skills and have a good support network and take care of myself, the better it will be. I felt like the universe was telling me it was time to have this conversation. And we laughed when we made the joke about a million little things, because we started that show last night. We watched like 4 episodes, I think.
3.
3 or 4 episodes. And
after a movie. So we really had we had quite a binging fest.
Speaking of, like staying up too late. For those of you that don't know, it's about someone who takes their own life in their friend circle, and they're like, how did we not see it? How did we not know? And we're watching this show, and I'm like okay through it, but I can feel my body change. I can feel myself tense when he's walking over to the ledge of the building and he's putting his foot on the step, because I felt those things. And it's nothing that you could describe to someone. It's just a feeling. And so whoever wrote that show, good job, because you nailed it. It's not that the depression came back, but it's almost like when you remember a traumatic experience, your body can still feel what it felt like, or you can, it's happening, but it's not happening. And after the 4th episode, I just fucking lost it. And I just told Bethy, I'm like, I need you to hold me and just be here with me. And I explained to her how it felt so real and how I remember how scary it was, and that feeling and that hopelessness. And I'm so proud of you, because your immediate question, because now depression was, have you been having any of those feelings or thoughts recently? Because we don't allow it to be silent. We don't allow it to hide in the dark. Like, you just came right out, and what a safe and great opportunity for me to say yes if I needed to. So that made me feel like she's my person. She gets me, because that's not an easy question to ask, but she needed to know, like, is this back? And I said, no, I just could feel how real it was and how scary. Like, I could feel the experience. And so then you start crying, and we realized that it was 2 years ago
Mm-hmm.
to the 18th, and today's the 19th.
Yeah, this is being released far later
Oh,
than when
well, but like
when we
just
actually
to
release
remember
it.
like how far away that was, but how real it was for both of us
Mhm.
and how scary it was. So,
Well, and I would say that we had quite a few amazing people by our sides through the journey
yeah.
that we went through, and in our circle, it's not something that is taboo to talk
No.
about.
And that's a really good point, because I think we're breaking the stigma down more and more. But I remember hearing things of people saying, like, oh, they want attention. Like, they're just
Mhm.
saying they're suicidal because they want attention. And to that point, okay, say that is true, then they need attention. Like, they're doing it because they
It's a cry
need
for
some,
help.
it's a
Yeah.
cry for help. And even though it might not be in a way that pleases you, or it feels obnoxious to you, and I get it, like suicide and depression way out of it, just like people who are attention seeking, it's really easy to get frustrated and be like, why are you behaving that way? But like, if you can just flip it and look through a compassionate lens of like, oh, instead of being annoyed, like, what are they needing? Like, what is
Mhm.
that cry for help? Are they lonely? Are they having these thoughts?
Well, and also when someone unfortunately does go through with taking their own life, people will look back and say,
Yeah.
what could I have done? What could I have done? And it's like, or why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they tell me? Well, just because they didn't come out and say it in the words that you expected to hear, maybe they were telling you,
Yeah.
And so it's just good to know when you're in those situations to, again, like you're saying, be a little compassionate, try to understand, like, why is this person reaching out in the way that they are. It may feel obnoxious at some points where you're like, oh, this person's always trying to get my attention.
And you always, like, I took a suicide awareness training a long time after all of that, and they say it feels uncomfortable, but ask the question, because if something happens, you will regret that you didn't. And the worst they can say is, oh no, I'm not struggling like that, I just had a bad day. But it's letting it hide and not talking about it that is the most dangerous piece of it. And for me, like, I'm so strict about it now. I have a 48-hour rule. So if I ever get into that zone where I start to feel depressed, I give myself 48 hours to say, like, oh, did I eat food I shouldn't have and my mood's bad? Or am I about to start my period? Or am I just like having a bad day? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you will feel times where it feels like depression. So my rule is I give myself 48 hours to like see what it is and work through it. And if after 48 hours it has not gone away, then I have a conversation with you and say, I've been feeling this the past 2 days. It hasn't gone away. What do we do? And then also you having my signs so to ask about it, because I was really upset last night, like crying hysterically. So you were probably like, okay, has she been hiding it again and the show like brought it up, or what's going on? And so I think it's that combination of people in your life being aware and being open and talking about it and knowing the signs to look for, and then you having a set rule for yourself of like,
Yeah, and I will say two things to kind of wrap this up. So one is, as the person on the other side, you're right. It's very, very uncomfortable to ask someone if they're struggling with these things. It's also very uncomfortable to be the one to have to identify that they're struggling with these things. I am fortunate in that you are very self-aware. You are very, very conscious of when you're having crying episodes, when you're not sleeping anymore, when you're feeling certain ways. Not everyone is that way, right? And so it's far easier for me when, if I do notice something that you haven't brought up to me, it's much easier, but still tough for me to say, hey, I don't want to upset you, but I just want to say that I've been noticing that you have been crying more often. I just want to check in and see how you are and like where you are with the depression. Are there any thoughts that we need to talk about, etc.?
And I've had to learn to like be nice and open and receptive to that.
Yeah, because I was going to say, the very few times that I've identified it when you haven't,
Yeah.
have felt rather like you might throw daggers at me.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't care,
Right.
because I love you more than anything you would say to me to push me away in that instance. So I would say to those out there who are the other side of, your other is the one that's struggling with the depression, don't back down from it because it's not easy. It will never feel easy. It will never feel easy to say to someone, hey, it seems like a demon may have crawled in your soul and is slowly taking you down right now. Is that accurate? That will never feel easy, but it's very, very important.
Well, and for me, if I'm being honest with myself, why I would get defensive when you would ask, it's because I felt upset that you could see it and I couldn't.
Yeah,
right?
because
I'm closest to it, so
Yeah.
I should know.
But then there have been other times where I'm like, hey, I just want to make sure, like last night when you were crying about it and I was like, are you experiencing these things again? And you were like, oh no, I'm just identifying with things that I felt before, and man, they really nailed it, and it just hit really close to home. And so you're right, when you're not feeling it, you're not defensive at all. You're just like, oh gosh, no, I'm not there.
So defensiveness could actually
could be a sign. The final thing I'll say is you rarely will see someone be forthcoming with the depression. Like, there are so many people who are hiding behind a brave face, who seemingly have it all together, who, the show that we watched, this is particularly why it was quite close to home, is because everyone in the show seemed high functioning. They were all very successful. They had these careers, very happy, had very loving spouses. Like, everything seemed to be in its place. And I would never say, well, I'm not going to ask because they seem to have it all together, because that is where depression becomes the most dangerous, is because depression does not discriminate. And so it doesn't matter if you are wealthy or poor, or have a career or don't have a career, or have kids or don't have a kids, or have a spouse or don't have a spouse, have a house, don't, like, it does not matter. Your class, race, ethnicity, religious background, like, none of it matters. None of it matters. It is
it's almost like an
equally
infection.
devastating.
It's like, it's so weird, because I think of like curling my hair 2 days ago when we were getting ready to go somewhere, and it was the exact same thing I was doing when that situation happened. And it's so foreign and so familiar to me at the same time. It's not you. And I think that's important to note, because I think we start to hide because we feel like, well, something must be wrong with me. Like, I'm obviously crazy. It's not you. It's like an infection that gets in and it starts to take over. And if you don't address it, it starts to spread and it gets bigger.
Well, and I remember in therapy, Counselor Dan said to us, because I remember describing, like, when the depression hits, when it grabs you, it is absolutely like you're a totally different human, like unrecognizable. And he said, well, that's because it's not Courtney. It's not Courtney. So let's name it.
Oh, I forgot about
so
that.
He said, let's name it, because that will help us to continue to remember this isn't Courtney saying these things or doing these things. This is the depression. And so we named it Beelzebub.
Oh, I forgot. I think you did, because I was like, I don't fucking care.
And so anyway, all that to say, this episode ran a little bit longer.
I wanted to say one more thing.
Oh, okay.
So from the perspective of someone who has struggled with depression, if you are experiencing anything that feels out of the normal, or you've had passive suicidal or active suicidal thoughts, please reach out and get help. There's nothing to be ashamed of at all. And you can't fight it alone. And that is coming from a recovering perfectionist, recovering people pleaser. You will tell yourself time and time again that you can do it on your own. And the truth is you can't. It's like, again, an infection. Unless you're a doctor, and even doctors can't like do their own thing sometimes. Like, a doctor can't perform brain surgery on themselves. So you can't.
Fair point.
Yeah. You can't like just think that you can take care of it. So please reach out. We will link some resources in the show notes, and we get it. Like, we have two very different perspectives, as someone who struggles directly and someone who's had to support someone. And I will say, to your point, people who are supporting people with depression also need their own support network, because it's just as tough on the other side.
And you'll notice in a lot of our pictures and videos that we both have a tattoo on the inside of our left arms.
Oh,
and those tattoos were in support of Suicide Awareness Month, and a local tattoo shop that we had back home. They gave 100% of the proceeds of any semicolon tattoo, which is the symbol for suicide awareness. They gave any proceeds for those tattoos directly to a suicide prevention program, and we went to the local walk or march in our town for it, etc. So we got those tattoos and we got them together. It was my first tattoo, but we got them together as a sign and a symbol to never forget what we went through, so that we continue to speak it out loud and encourage others to speak it out loud.
Yeah.
So this episode went a little bit longer, but it was very important, and we just wanted to be outright and forthcoming with our experience, because we want you to, if you're struggling with depression, please don't be ashamed of it. Please reach out for help. And if you're supporting someone with depression,
or you suspect that someone might have depression,
please have courage, because it might save their life that you check in with them. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so that's it for this week. Tune in next week. You can find us on all social platforms at Life with Beth and Court, and you can head over to our website, lifewithbethandcourt.com, for all of our show notes. And like Court said, we will link resources there, and we hope this episode was helpful for you. Until next time, keep building your best life.
Bye, guys.